Hi guys, this is Jimmy from xbiosoft.com. Today we're going to talk about something you might be doing in your business and that you should stop right now. QA developers. The term QA developers sometimes sounds like a misnomer since QA and developers are two different things. But many businesses use developers to do their QA, which is a problem because in essence what it means you're taking focus away from developing your software and you're shifting this focus elsewhere. And developers are not the best testers. Software development and QA testing are two different things. And as a business, you need to realize that. Of course, if your business is at its infancy, you might need to use your current developers to do QA testing. But over time, you should steer away from that and focus your developers in developing your software and having proper software testers do all the QA part for you. So we thought we'd give you our opinion on QA led by developers, what is wrong with that approach, and what you should be doing if your main objective is to have the best performing software possible. And as always, guys, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share because it helps us create more content for you. So before we talk about the key weaknesses of QA developers or QA led by developers and the must and must not do of QA, let's talk about the three main reasons why businesses will have QA developers. There are three main reasons. So the first reason could be the business was focused more on software development than software testing. So basically, the business put all its efforts in developing its software with little to no regard to software testing. But then bugs, defects, and end users' feedbacks push these businesses to hire or internally hire a QA team made out of developers. But then, as we know, developers are not the best at QA. We've seen it many times where the level of expertise in QA and software testings is low to mid level. So both in terms of what processes and what's the best practice in terms of QA, but also in terms of the best usage of tools or knowledge of the best tools for the particular software or business issue. So for example, the app or software of these businesses could be at a well-advanced stage, but behind on things such as test automation. We've seen it with many businesses. The second reason could be that the software was not the primary focus of the business, but then as this software took on a life of its own, it kind of forced the business to, again, hire a QA team internally made out of developers once more. And as we just highlighted, with all the limitations that come with it. We also get contacted by these businesses with this type of issue. And the third reason could be the business underestimated software testing in their whole process. Let's take this case scenario of a company with nearly 100 software engineers who are very good at developing the best app or the best software for their end users, but then they think, oh, they can do QA or software testing by themselves, but then realize that they are developers, they are not testers. And with that come a lot of limitations. So again, they could be lagging behind in things like test automation just prior to their app or software being released. This is a very recurrent issue we see with businesses who underestimate the task at hand with QA and face bottlenecks at some stage in their software development. Now let's talk about the key weaknesses with QA developers or QA led by developers. The first one will be the mindset. We compare developers to racing car drivers and software testers to car engineers. As you can see, these are two different worlds. The developers is focused on making sure it got the best software, while the testers is making sure that it finds defects and bugs wherever there are, sometimes in places that the developers wouldn't think of. So as you can see, there's a pitfall in having this QA developers mindset. For one, they might not be using the best testing tools, but the fact that they have to do testing keeps their focus away from what matters the most for them, which is to develop this software and focus on the best features and codes for this software. The use of tools is the second key weaknesses you will find with QA developers or QA led by developers, because as we mentioned, developing and testing are two different areas. So developers might have some knowledge on what kind of tools to use, but they won't know whether the tools that they're using is the best performing tools for the task at hand. When we audit the current state of the QA team members in the business, what we see often with QA led by developers is that they have low to mid-level of expertise in things such as automation or functional testing, for example. And the third weakness with QA led by developers is the lack implementation of best practices. This lack of best practices from QA led by developers not only stem from not using the best testing tools as we mentioned, but also not having clear visibility on target, timing, steps, and checkpoints versus target. And we see it all the time. Many businesses who come to see us and ask us for advice do not know how to implement best practices that will steer them away from having a QA developer mindset or QA led by developers. Now that we talk about the reason why you have a QA led by developers and the weaknesses with QA developers, let's talk about more specifically the must not do as far as QA is concerned. So the first mistake will be to make, as we mentioned, make QA the sole responsibilities of developers. Developers are not trained testers, so they do not have access to the best tools, and therefore they might or might not be good at testing their own code. Still, one of the critical areas where developers have serious weaknesses is looking at functionalities they are testing from an end user's point of view, which means integrating all of the software function from the end user's viewpoint. Unfortunately, developers rarely have the knowledge of all the different functionalities of their software to be able to think that way. On the other hand of the spectrum, you should avoid making QA everyone's responsibility. Of course, you want to have a team mindset when it comes to QA and kind of involve different parts of the organization, but what you want to avoid is saying, okay, QA is everybody's responsibility, and at the end of the day, you do not see anything happening because nobody is held accountable for it. The third must not do is fighting without prioritizing. So it's important to understand the company vision and mission first, otherwise the QA team will lose visibility and try to test everything and kind of lose focus and lose their way in the amount of testing they'll be carrying out. So prioritization is very important, and it tends to be led by the way end users will interact with your software. So that's already one indication of how you can prioritize your overall QA strategy. So now that we talked about what you shouldn't do or must not do, let's talk about the must do in QA, the best practices, if you will. So the first step will be to determine goals and concrete objectives. So as an organization, you need to be clear about what your end goals and objectives are as far as QA and software testing is concerned. So for example, do you want to increase the quality of your software, decrease defects, or increase automation? The second step is to understand your software, and therefore is to understand your current situations, and from there access your software and do things like report on defects, examine test automation, etc. And the third must do is to develop an implementation plan. And this is something we do in our three-step approach, where we work with the customers in first understanding their current visions and goals, then access their software to analyze their current situation and do some reporting on defects, on test automation. And the third step is to have a proper plan of action where you're going to have a measurement versus different steps you'll be taking toward this implementation phase. And the fourth must do of QA best practices is to clarify everybody's role. For example, the organization could have developers responsible for the unit testings of their own codes, while the user acceptance team will be responsible for running the top scenarios that the end users is likely to encounter. So different teams could be responsible for different parts of the QA function. Then the organization could gather all this information and make decisions as a group to decide whether the software is ready for release or not. I mean, as you can see, this is different from just saying everyone is responsible, but at the end, there's no accountability. So as you've seen, guys, QA developers or QA led by developers is kind of a misnomer, and the ideal scenarios is developers and testers working together to make sure the software, the machine is working at the best of its performance, of its quality. But it's essential to understand from a developer point of view what are your limitations in terms of software testing, and the fact that you need to communicate with software testers, and software testers need to communicate with developers in order for a team, as a team, to make the best decisions in terms of the quality of the software, whether the software is ready for release or not. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, enjoyed this content. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Give us the thumb up and hit the notification bell, so whenever a new content and new information is coming out, you're the first one to know about it. Until next time, enjoy your day, and remember, you must not do with QA led by developers.